Tonight, before the stories begin, let the room become a little wider around you. You may have arrived here with a mind that is still holding many small things. A message not answered, a task not finished, a face you cannot stop remembering, a sentence someone said that keeps returning, as if it is asking to be repaired before sleep will allow you to enter. And perhaps, under all of those things, there is one quiet fear. The fear that if you stop thinking, even for a moment, you will lose control of something important. But here, for this hour, nothing needs to be forced into order. The night is not asking you to become perfect before you rest. The breath does not need a plan. The body does not need a final explanation. Even the mind, with all its little lamps still burning, can be met kindly. If you would like, you can leave a small note in the comments with the time and the place where you are listening from, as if placing a lantern by the road for another tired traveler. And if these stories bring even a little calm, you may gently like the video and subscribe, so this quiet place is easy to find again on another night. Then let that be enough. No effort, no urgency, just one small gesture, and then the world may grow soft again. There was once a mountain temple where the evenings came early in winter. The temple stood above a narrow village with stone steps rising through pine trees and a bell tower looking over fields that slept beneath pale mist. In the cold months, the monks finished their chores before sunset whenever they could. They carried water from the well, they stacked firewood under the eaves, they swept the courtyard, folded the mats, washed the rice bowls, and closed the wooden gate before the first stars appeared. Among them was a young novice named Wren, who had a habit of finishing everything twice. If he swept the courtyard, he returned to see whether one more needle had fallen from the pines. If he folded robes, he checked the corners again and again. If he carried water, he looked into the bucket as though the water might have become less complete on the way back. The older monks did not scold him. They only noticed the tightness in his shoulders and the way his breath stayed high in his chest, like a bird that could not find a branch. One evening, snow began to fall before the work was done. It was not a storm, only a soft, patient snow, descending without hurry. The courtyard stones turned white at the edges. The roofs grew quiet. The pines bent a little, accepting what came. Inside the kitchen, the last pot of barley soup was still warm, and a small candle burned beside the cutting board. Wren looked at the courtyard and saw that he had not finished sweeping. A line of pine needles lay near the bell tower. A broken twig rested beside the well. Footprints crossed the path where another monk had carried firewood after Wren had already smoothed the snow. To anyone else, the temple looked peaceful. To Wren, it looked unfinished. He took the broom and stepped outside. The old gatekeeper, who was closing the heavy wooden gate, turned and watched him. "The bell is about to sound," the gatekeeper said. Wren bowed quickly. "I will only take a moment." The gatekeeper rested one hand on the gate. "The snow is still falling." "Yes," Wren said, already sweeping. "That is why I must hurry." The old gatekeeper did not answer. He only stood there, listening to the broom move over stone. Wren swept the pine needles into a neat pile. Then snow covered the place where they had been. He brushed away the footprints, and more flakes settled into the shallow marks. He moved the broken twig, and a small clump of snow dropped from a branch behind him. The more he worked, the more the courtyard changed. At last, the temple bell sounded. Its deep voice moved through the cold air once, then again, then a third time. The sound did not push, it did not hurry. It opened, widened, and slowly faded into the falling snow. Ren stopped with the broom in his hands. For a moment, he listened. The line of pine needles was gone, but another had appeared near the wall. The footprints were softened but not erased. The snow continued to fall, touching the roof, the well, the bell tower, his sleeves, his hair, the broom, the stones. The gatekeeper stepped beside him and looked at the courtyard. "Is it finished?" he asked. Ren looked down. He wanted to say no. He wanted to point to the snow, the needles, the imperfect path, the work still waiting. But the bell's fading sound was still inside his ears. The courtyard was not finished. And yet, the evening had arrived. After a while, he whispered, "It is time to stop." The gatekeeper nodded. "That is different from finished." Ren held the broom a little lower. The old man opened the gate just enough for both of them to pass through, then closed it behind them. The courtyard remained outside, unfinished and beautiful. Snow kept falling. The pine trees kept letting go of what they could not hold. The bell rope moved once in the wind, then became still. Inside the temple, the other monks were already seated. No one asked whether every stone was clean. No one asked whether the last twig had been moved. The soup was warm. The candle was low. The room smelled of barley, smoke, and wet wool drying near the wall. Ren sat down with the broom still leaning near the doorway. His hands felt strange without work in them. They wanted to rise, to adjust, to correct. But the bowl was placed before him, and steam lifted from it in a thin white thread. He watched the steam curl, disappear, and return. Curl, disappear, and return. For the first time that evening, his shoulders lowered. This is a small Zen door, and it does not open through argument. It opens through seeing. Some things are not finished when we stop. They are simply allowed to wait. The snow keeps falling. The courtyard keeps changing. The world does not become complete just because the mind demands completion. And perhaps your own night is like that courtyard. There may be pine needles of thought scattered everywhere. A conversation you wish you had answered differently. A responsibility waiting on tomorrow's path. A worry that keeps falling again after you have swept it away. You may have tried, many times, to make the mind clean enough for sleep, but the bell has already sounded. Not loudly, not as a command, only as a gentle reminder from somewhere deep in the evening. It is time to stop. Your jaw can loosen now, even if the answer has not come. Your shoulders can move down toward the bed, even if the task remains undone. Your hands can unclench beneath the blanket, even if some part of life is still asking to be arranged. The breath may enter and leave without making a promise to solve anything. The courtyard can remain outside. The broom can lean by the doorway. Everything can wait while the snow continues to fall. The snow did not stop during the night. It settled on the temple roof, on the low wall, on the bare branches of the plum tree, and on the broom that Wren had left leaning by the doorway. By morning, the courtyard had become a field of soft white. The lines he had tried so carefully to make were gone. The small pile of pine needles had vanished beneath the snow. Even his footprints from the evening before had been filled in, as if the night itself had quietly said, "There is nothing more to correct here." Wren woke before the first bell. For a few breaths, he did not remember the courtyard. He only heard the quiet sound of snow sliding from the roof in little waves. His blanket was warm over his knees. His hands, folded near his chest, were no longer clenched. Then the memory returned. The unfinished sweeping, the gatekeeper's question, the strange feeling of leaving something undone. He rose and went outside before the others. The cold touched his face, but not sharply. The whole temple seemed to be breathing slowly. The stone lantern wore a white cap. The well rope was stiff with frost. The bell tower stood silent, its dark wood almost blue in the early light. Wren looked at the place where he had worked so hard, and for the first time, he could not find the exact problem he had been trying to solve. The courtyard was not clean in the way he had wanted. It was not arranged. It was not under his control. Yet it was peaceful. A crow landed on the wall and shook snow from its wings. A few flakes fell onto the stones. Wren noticed the old habit rising in him, the quick little pull in the body that said, "Fix it, clear it, make it right." But the crow only turned its head and looked at him with one bright eye, as if it had no understanding of human urgency. Then it flew away. Wren laughed very softly, so softly that the sound was almost only breath. Behind him, the gatekeeper came out carrying 2 wooden buckets. He did not mention the broom. He did not praise Wren for stopping. He did not explain anything. He simply handed 1 bucket to the young monk and began walking toward the well. The path was covered, and each step made a soft, hollow sound. Wren followed. The bucket handle was cold against his fingers. The sky was pale, and the first light moved slowly over the roofs. At the well, the gatekeeper lowered the rope and listened as the bucket touched the dark water below. "Last night," Wren said after a while, "I thought the work would remain in my mind if I left it unfinished." The gatekeeper pulled the rope hand over hand. "And did it?" Wren watched the wet bucket rise from the well. Water ran down its sides and disappeared into the snow. "For a little while," he said. "Then I slept." The old man nodded. "Many thoughts are like guests who knock loudly. If you do not open the door at once, they may still wait outside. But some discover that they were never as urgent as they sounded." Wren listened. He expected another sentence, perhaps a lesson that would make the matter complete. But the gatekeeper only lifted the bucket and began the walk back. That was all. The teaching was not in a speech. It was in the pause after the rope creaked. It was in the water rising when it was time, not before. It was in the snow accepting every footprint without complaint. Wren carried his bucket slowly, feeling the weight of it pull his shoulder down. The weight was real, but it was simple. It did not ask him to imagine tomorrow. It did not ask him to repair yesterday. It only asked to be carried to the kitchen. Perhaps this is one reason ordinary work can become a doorway into quiet. A bucket does not become heavier because the mind adds 10 more buckets to it. A step does not need the next 100 steps. A hand around a wooden handle can feel only this one handle, this one cold morning, this one breath moving in the body. And perhaps your mind tonight has been carrying more than one bucket. There may be the real thing in your hands. One duty, one decision, one message, one pain in the body, one concern for someone you love. But around it, the mind may have gathered many imagined buckets. What if this becomes worse? What if I forget? What if I disappoint someone? What if I should have known better? What if tomorrow asks more of me than I can give? The mind can create a whole line of buckets that have not yet been filled. For now, you do not have to carry them. Let your attention come down to the simple weight that is here. The feeling of the bed beneath your back. The blanket touching your legs. The air at the edge of the nostrils. The small movement of the chest as breath arrives, and the softer movement as breath leaves. This is enough work for the body tonight. Ren and the gatekeeper returned to the kitchen. The temple cook was already awake, cutting radishes on a worn board. Each slice made a quiet sound. The room smelled of smoke, cold water, and rice beginning to warm. Ren poured his bucket into the large clay jar. The water struck the inside with a deep, rounded sound, then became still. He noticed something. When the water was moving, it reflected nothing clearly. When it settled, the small window appeared on its surface, then a piece of morning sky, then the dark line of the cook's sleeve. Nothing had been forced into clarity. The water had simply stopped being disturbed. Ren stood there longer than he needed to. The cook looked at him and smiled. "Are you waiting for the jar to speak?" Ren shook his head. "No, I think I am waiting for myself to stop speaking." The cook returned to the radishes. No one laughed loudly. No one turned the moment into a lesson. The knife went on moving. The water held the window. Snow continued to loosen from the roof. There are nights when the mind asks for silence, but continues talking to itself. It explains why you should be calm. It argues with its own worry. It makes plans for how to stop planning. It tries to finish the unfinished by thinking in circles. But water does not become still by being persuaded. It becomes still when nothing keeps stirring it. So, for a little while, you may not need to answer the thoughts that arrive. You may let them knock without opening every door. You may let them wait outside the gate under the falling snow. Some may still be there tomorrow, and tomorrow you can meet them with daylight in your eyes. Some may leave before morning because they were only echoes asking for attention. The breath can continue without deciding which is which. Your forehead can smooth a little. Your tongue can rest. Your shoulders can feel the slow pull of gravity, as if the body is remembering that it belongs to the earth and not to the spinning wheel of thought. The hands can soften, no longer gripping the invisible handle of every possible future. The bucket has been set down. The water is settling. The window appears by itself. The window on the water held for only a moment. Then the temple cook lifted another pot. The table shook, and the reflection trembled into small pieces. The square of sky broke apart. The dark sleeve vanished. The surface became only water again, moving in circles against the clay wall of the jar. Ren noticed his mind wanting the reflection back. It was such a small thing. Nothing important had been lost. Yet the moment it disappeared, his attention reached for it. He wanted the window to return, wanted the stillness to repeat itself, wanted the quiet feeling to stay exactly as it had been. The cook placed the pot down and glanced at him. "You saw something," she said. Ren bowed his head. "Only the window in the water." "And now?" "Only water." The cook smiled and pushed a little pile of sliced radish into the soup. "Then the jar is honest." Ren carried this sentence with him through the morning. The jar is honest. It did not pretend to be still when it was moving. It did not cling to the window when the water shook. It did not apologize for becoming unclear. It simply showed what was present, and when the movement ended, it would show something else. Later that day, after the meal bowls had been washed and the snow had begun to loosen under a thin winter sun, Ren was sent down the mountain path to bring a packet of medicine to an old woman in the village. The path curved between pines and bare shrubs. Snow fell from the branches in soft clumps. Somewhere below, a dog barked once. Then the sound faded into the valley. Ren carried the small packet inside his sleeve. At first, the walk was peaceful. His sandals pressed into the snow with a slow, clean sound. The air smelled of pine resin and cold earth. A hawk circled above the far ridge without moving its wings. Ren felt the morning's lesson still glowing faintly inside him. Let the water settle. Let the thoughts wait. Carry only what is in the hand. But halfway down the path, he remembered a letter. It was not a real letter. Not yet. It was one he had been composing silently in his mind for many days, to his older brother, who lived beyond the southern hills. Their last meeting had ended badly. There had been sharp words about the family house, about duty, about who had left and who had stayed. Ren had entered the monastery not long after, but the conversation had followed him like a shadow that knew every road. Sometimes, while sweeping, he answered his brother again. Sometimes, while washing bowls, he imagined the brother answering back. Sometimes he wrote entire letters in his mind, each one calmer and wiser than the last, only to tear them apart inwardly and begin again. Now, on the snowy path, the old conversation returned. His step changed. The packet of medicine was still in his sleeve, but his attention was no longer with the old woman in the village. It was in the room of the past, standing before his brother, trying to repair every word. By the time he reached the small bridge near the lower stream, he had become tired, without knowing why. The bridge was narrow, made of dark wood with frost along its rails. Beneath it, water moved under thin plates of ice. A few brown leaves were caught in the current, turning slowly where the stream curved around a stone. An old man stood on the bridge, holding a bundle of reeds. He was not a monk. His coat was patched at the elbows. His beard was white and uneven. He looked like someone who had worked outdoors for many years and had learned not to argue with weather. When Wren approached, the old man did not move aside at once. He was watching the leaves turn in the water. Wren waited politely. After a while, the old man said, "They have been trying to pass that stone since sunrise." Wren looked down. The leaves circled, touched the stone, drifted back, and circled again. "Will they pass?" Wren asked. "When the water changes," the old man said. Wren thought of the letter in his mind, the sentences circling the same stone. He looked at the leaves again. They did not seem angry. They did not seem wise. They only moved where the current carried them, around and around, back and forward, near the stone, away from the stone. Not free yet, but not wrong. The old man shifted his bundle of reeds. "You are going to Mother Sai's house?" Wren touched the packet in his sleeve. "Yes." "Then go while the soup is still hot there. She waits for medicine, not for a monk lost in a stream." The words were plain, almost rough, but they landed gently. Wren bowed and crossed the bridge. The old man stepped aside without ceremony. Behind him, the leaves kept turning. As Wren walked on, he did not solve the matter with his brother. He did not find the perfect sentence. He did not forgive everything all at once. But he saw that his mind had been circling one stone, and seeing it was already different from being trapped inside it. A thought can circle for a long time. A regret can return to the same place. A conversation can repeat itself in the dark, asking to be finished before the body is allowed to sleep. But not every circling needs your hand tonight. Sometimes the water has not changed yet. Sometimes the kindest thing is to notice the turning and continue carrying the medicine that belongs to this moment. Perhaps there is a thought like that in you now. A memory. A person. A sentence you wish you had said. A silence you wish you had filled. It may move around the same stone again and again, and because it returns, the mind may believe it must be solved immediately. But returning is not the same as requiring action. A leaf can circle without asking you to climb into the stream. Let the body feel this difference. Your back can rest against the bed. Your breathing can be simple. Your hands do not have to reach into every current. Your chest does not have to tighten around an old conversation. If a memory appears, you may notice it softly, circling, only circling. Not an emergency, not a command. Some waters change slowly. Some leaves pass when the morning warms. Some words can wait until the heart is less tired. Wren reached the old woman's house just as smoke was rising from the roof hole. The door curtain moved in the wind. Inside, someone coughed, and a kettle began to sing in a thin, uneven voice. Wren touched the medicine packet in his sleeve and remembered why he had come. The past remained behind him on the bridge, still turning, still unfinished, but no longer carrying his whole body away. The old woman's house was warmer than Wren expected. A small fire burned low in the hearth, and the smoke climbed through the roof hole in a slow gray ribbon. Bundles of dried herbs hung from the beams. A patched quilt covered the woman's knees. Beside her, on a low stool, a bowl of soup steamed beside two untouched rice cakes. She had been waiting, but not anxiously. Her thin hands rested one over the other, as if they had long ago learned the shape of patience. Ren bowed and placed the medicine packet beside the soup. "From the temple," he said. Mother Sai looked at the packet, then at him. Her eyes were clouded with age, but there was still a little brightness in them, like a coal hidden under ash. "You walked through snow," she said. "Yes." "And through thoughts, perhaps." Ren looked up. The old woman smiled. "Young faces show weather clearly." He did not know what to answer, so he sat near the doorway while her granddaughter prepared the medicine with hot water. The house was simple. One wall held a shelf with a cracked blue bowl, a wooden comb, and a folded cloth. Near the hearth, a cat slept with its tail over its nose. Outside, children's voices passed on the road, bright for a moment, then gone. Mother Sai lifted one rice cake, broke it in half, and offered a piece to Ren. He accepted with both hands. For a while, they ate in silence. The rice cake was warm, plain, and slightly sweet from being toasted near the fire. Ren noticed how slowly the old woman chewed. She did not seem to hurry toward the next bite. She did not look around for what needed fixing. Each small movement was complete in itself. After she drank the medicine, her granddaughter asked, "Grandmother, should I mend the roof cloth before noon?" Mother Sai looked toward the corner, where a little cold light entered through a torn place in the hanging cloth. "Before the next rain," she said. The girl frowned. "But I can do it now." "You can," the old woman said, "but the beans will burn first." The girl turned quickly toward the hearth, where a clay pot had begun to hiss. She laughed, caught between worry and amusement, and went to stir it. Mother Sei looked at Ren. "The young think every need speaks with the same voice." Ren thought of the leaves circling the stone, the letter to his brother, the courtyard under snow. He thought of how every unfinished thing inside him seemed to knock with the same urgency, though some belonged to this breath, and some belonged to another season. "How do you know what must be done now?" he asked. Mother Sai held the warm cup in both hands. "I listen for what will spoil." Ren waited. She nodded toward the hearth. "Beans spoil if ignored. A torn cloth can wait until the sky changes. An angry word may wait until the heart is less proud. A child's tears may not wait. A field may wait through snow. A fire may not. The body knows many of these things before the mind finishes arguing." The granddaughter stirred the beans, and the sharp smell of burning faded into something earthy and good. Ren looked down at his hands. He had spent so much of his life treating every inner sound as a fire. A memory was a fire. A possible mistake was a fire. A future task was a fire. A person's disappointment, imagined or real, was a fire. No wonder he was tired. He'd been running from room to room inside himself, carrying buckets toward smoke that was sometimes only morning mist. Mother Sei drank another sip of medicine. "Some things can wait," she said. Not as a grand teaching, but as one might say, the road is muddy today. In that small house, the sentence became practical. Not everything could wait forever. The beans needed stirring. Medicine needed delivery. The old woman needed warmth. But the roof cloth did not need to be mended before the pot was saved. The past did not need to be settled before the next breath. The mind did not need to answer every call simply because the call was loud. This is a gentle form of wisdom. Not escape, not denial, not laziness, but right nearness. To know what is near enough to touch and what can be left outside the door for a while. To care for the real flame without bowing to every imagined spark. Tonight, perhaps your mind has made many sparks bright. One says, remember this. One says, plan that. One says, protect yourself. One says, explain yourself. One says, decide before morning. And because they all speak at once, the body may feel surrounded. The heart may tighten as if every corner of life has caught fire. But listen gently. Not all of them are flames. Some are only old smoke. Some are moonlight on the wall. Some are a torn roof cloth under a clear sky. Some are letters that will be wiser when written by a rested hand. Some are questions that cannot be answered better at midnight than at dawn. Let your body begin to know the difference. If there is one true thing that needs care tonight, let it be very simple. The breath entering, the breath leaving, the body lying down, the eyes growing heavy, the jaw unclenching, the hands remembering they do not have to hold every tool at once. Let the near thing be near. Let the far thing be far. Ren finished the rice cake and stood to leave. Mother Sai's granddaughter wrapped a small cloth around the empty medicine cup and gave it back to him. At the doorway, the old woman called his name. He turned. "Tell the temple cook," she said, "that her medicine is bitter, but not as bitter as young people rushing." Ren smiled. The granddaughter covered her mouth to hide a laugh. Outside, the snow had begun to melt from the road. Water dripped from the eaves into a wooden basin, one drop at a time. Ren looked toward the bridge, where the leaves were still turning somewhere beyond the bend. He did not need to check whether they had passed the stone. As he walked, he felt something quiet spreading through his ribs. It was not a sudden peace. It was more like finding one small dry place to sit while rain continues beyond the roof. The world had not become simple. His brother still existed. The winter still asked for wood and water. The temple would still need sweeping. But the order of things had softened. One breath first, one step first, one honest task first. The rest did not disappear, yet it moved back to its proper distance. The medicine had been delivered. The beans had not burned. The letter to his brother could wait. The road back to the temple did not ask Ren to hurry. It rose slowly from the village, passing the small bridge, the reed beds, the sleeping fields, and the pines that held drops of melting snow along their needles. The morning had widened. The clouds were thin now, and a pale sun moved behind them like a lantern behind paper. Ren walked with the empty medicine cloth folded inside his sleeve. The old conversation with his brother still waited somewhere in him, but it no longer filled the whole road. It was like a room with the door half closed. He knew it was there. He knew he might enter it later. Yet, for the moment, his feet were on the mountain path, and the path had its own quiet requests. Step here. Avoid the ice near the stone. Notice the branch bending low. breathe when the hill rises. Near the bridge, the old man with the bundle of reeds was gone. Wren paused and looked down into the stream. The leaves that had circled the stone were no longer there. Perhaps they had passed. Perhaps they had sunk. Perhaps another current had taken them under the ice. The water did not explain itself. He felt a small surprise. Some part of him had expected the leaves to remain, as if a problem must stay where the mind last saw it. But the stream had continued without his watching. The leaves had not needed his concern in order to move. Wren bowed slightly to the water, though no one was there to see it. As he climbed, the temple bell sounded once above him. Not the evening bell this time, but a lighter call for the middle of the day. The sound reached through branches, touched the snow, and thinned into the sky. Wren listened until it disappeared. When he returned to the temple, the courtyard was full of work. A monk was chopping wood near the side wall. Another was shaking snow from straw mats. The cook stood beneath the eaves, scolding a young cat that had placed one paw in a tray of flour. The gatekeeper sat on a low stool, mending a sandal strap, his bucket beside him, the rope still wet from the well. No one seemed troubled by how much remained unfinished. Wren noticed this with new eyes. The woodpile was not complete. The mats were not dry. The flour tray had a small paw print in it. The sandal strap was still broken. Yet the temple did not feel like a failure. It felt alive. Each person met the task in front of them, and the rest waited in the open air. The gatekeeper looked up. "Mother Sai received the medicine?" "Yes," Wren said. "She also sent a message." The cook turned from the cat. "If she says the medicine is bitter, tell her old age has made her tongue dramatic." Wren smiled. "She said it was bitter, but not as bitter as young people rushing." The cook laughed so hard that the cat fled under the storehouse. Even the gatekeeper's eyes brightened. For a little while, the courtyard filled with ordinary human sound. Laughter, chopping, dripping water, the soft scrape of straw on wood. Then the sounds separated again into simple work. No one tried to hold the laughter after it passed. No one asked it to become a lesson. It came, warmed the cold air, and left. Wren went to help with the mats. He took one end, while an older monk took the other. Together they lifted, shook, and hung each mat over a bamboo rail. Cold drops struck Wren's sleeve. Bits of straw clung to his fingers. The older monk worked without speaking, but his silence was not empty. It had the shape of someone who was fully inside the task. After several mats, Wren noticed that one corner of the rail was loose. The peg had slipped halfway out. At once, the familiar movement rose in him. Fix the rail, find a hammer, check the other rails, make sure the mats do not fall. Before that thought could become a chain, the older monk touched the peg with one finger. "It will hold until afternoon," he said. Wren looked at the rail. "Are you sure?" The older monk lifted another mat. "Sure enough for wet straw?" "Sure enough." The words stayed with Wren as they worked. Not certain forever. Not perfect against every possible wind. Not complete beyond all doubt. Only sure enough for wet straw, for this hour, under this sky. How much of the mind's suffering comes from asking every small thing to become certain forever? A loose peg must prove the whole roof will stand. A tired feeling must prove the whole life is wrong. One unanswered message must prove a relationship is breaking. One mistake must become a map of the future. The mind wants a guarantee before it rests, but the world rarely gives guarantees. It gives pegs that hold for now. It gives bridges that carry one crossing. It gives cups that hold tea long enough to warm the hands. Tonight, you do not need certainty forever. You may only need enough safety for this breath, enough warmth for this minute, enough permission to let the eyes grow heavy, enough trust to set down the question and not pick it up again before morning. Feel how the body hears this differently from the mind. The mind may ask, "But what about tomorrow?" The body may answer with the weight of the blanket. The mind may ask, "But what if I forget?" The body may answer with one slow breath leaving. The mind may ask, "But what if it is not enough?" The body may answer by softening one hand. Sure enough for now, Ren and the older monk finished hanging the mats. The loose peg held. Later, someone would tap it back into place. Or perhaps the wind would loosen it again. Either way, the afternoon would know what to do when afternoon arrived. At noon, the monks gathered for their meal. Bowls were passed hand to hand. Steam rose from rice and winter greens. The cat, forgiven, watched from the doorway with flowers still on one paw. Ren sat near the wall, feeling the warmth of the bowl through his fingers. He thought again of his brother, but differently now, not as a fire, not as a stone in the stream, not as a task that must be completed before the next mouthful, more like a loose peg somewhere in the house of his heart. It mattered. It would need care, but it did not need to be hammered in the middle of the meal. So he lifted the bowl. The rice was warm. The room was quiet enough. And for that moment, quiet enough was complete. Quiet enough did not last because Ren held it tightly. It lasted because no one asked it to remain. After the meal, bowls were washed in the kitchen, mats were set near the stove to dry, and the monks returned to their ordinary tasks. The temple moved like a body that knew its own pace. A door opened. A sandal crossed the hall. Someone coughed near the storehouse. The cook lifted a lid and let steam rise into the rafters. Nothing was dramatic. Nothing was perfectly still. Yet the whole place seemed to breathe around its unfinished work. Ren was sent to the lower gate to help receive the afternoon offerings. On certain days, villagers climbed the stone steps with small gifts for the temple. Cabbages wrapped in straw, jars of pickled radish, bundles of kindling, a little salt, a repaired sleeve, a handful of chestnuts. Sometimes only a bow and a request for a sick relative to be remembered during evening chanting. The monks accepted what came with both hands. They wrote nothing unless writing was needed. They counted nothing unless counting was useful. Ren, however, liked to remember every detail. He stood by the gate with a flat wooden tray and silently repeated each item as it arrived. 3 cabbages from the miller's wife, 1 jar from the potter's son, 2 bundles of kindling from the widow near the east field, chestnuts from the children with red scarves, salt from the tea cellar, a torn sleeve to be mended by the sewing room, a request for old Taro's cough, a request for safe travel, a request for a baby not yet born. The more he tried to hold, the less he saw. A child bowed, and Wren barely noticed the mud on her knees. A farmer smiled, and Wren only repeated, 2 bundles, East Field. 2 bundles, East Field. A young mother asked whether the temple had enough lamp oil, and Wren answered politely while still holding the chestnuts in his mind. By the time a tea seller named Hannah reached the gate with a small sack of salt, Wren was no longer standing in the afternoon. He was standing inside a list. Hannah was a round-faced woman with strong hands and a blue cloth tied around her head. She had a way of looking at people as if she could tell whether they had eaten, slept, or told themselves the truth that day. She placed the sack of salt on the tray and watched Wren move his lips silently. "Are you praying?" she asked. Wren blinked. "No, I am remembering." "Remembering what?" "Everything." Hannah laughed softly, not unkindly. "That is a heavy offering to carry." Wren felt his ears warm. "I do not want anything to be forgotten." Hannah untied the cloth at her waist and took out 3 small paper packets. "Then remember this first. The old man at the tea stall cannot climb the steps today. He asks for a blessing before winter deepens. This packet is roasted barley. This one is dried orange peel. This one is nothing but a pebble my little boy insisted was important." She placed all 3 on the tray. Wren stared at them. The barley, the orange peel, the pebble. Behind them, his mind tried to protect the cabbages, the kindling, the chestnuts, the sleeve, the cough, the travel, the unborn child, the lamp oil, the salt, and now the tea stall, the old man, the winter, the boy, the pebble. For a moment, his thoughts became like birds startled from a tree. Hannah saw his face and became quiet. She reached toward the tray, picked up the pebble, and placed it in his palm. "Hold this," she said. Wren held it. It was smooth, dark, and cold, no larger than a plum stone. It did not explain why it mattered. It did not tell him where to put it. It simply rested against his skin with the full weight of one small thing. "Now," Hannah said, "what are you holding?" "A pebble." "Not the cabbages?" "No." "Not the widow's kindling?" "No." "Not my old man at the tea stall?" Wren looked at the pebble. "Not at this moment." Hannah nodded. "Good. When you carry the tray inside, someone can write the offerings. Someone can ask again if memory is needed. But a hand can hold only what it is holding. The rest must wait outside the fist." Wren felt the pebble settle more deeply into his palm. The teaching was almost too simple for his mind, which preferred difficult teachings because they gave it more to do. A hand can hold only what it is holding. Yet the truth of it entered through the skin. He could feel the difference between one pebble and the whole imagined burden of the village. The pebble had edges, it had temperature, it had weight. The list had no edges, it spread everywhere. Perhaps your mind also tries to hold a whole village at once. A name, a date, a bill, a promise, a worry about someone's health, a task for work, a small shame from years ago, something to buy, something to cancel, something to forgive, something to prove, something to become. Each one may be real in its own way, but they cannot all fit inside this one tired hand tonight. Let one thing be one thing. Let the rest stand quietly outside the fist. You do not have to throw your life away in order to rest. You only have to stop carrying all of it at the same time. Tomorrow can hold tomorrow's portion. Paper can hold a list. A morning mind can hold a practical task better than a midnight mind. Another person may remember what belongs to them. The earth itself holds more than you know. For now, feel the one small pebble of this moment. The weight of your body, the softness behind your eyes, the slow touch of cloth against your skin, the breath that is already here without being remembered. Ren carried the tray inside. This time, he did not repeat every offering in his head. He carried the tray. When the monk in the storehouse asked what had come, Ren answered what he knew, and where he did not know, they asked again. Nothing broke. No blessing was lost. The pebble was placed beside the shrine lamp, not because anyone understood it, but because a child had given it with both hands. As evening light began to lean across the floor, Ren opened his palm and saw the faint mark the pebble had left there. One small circle. One quiet proof that he did not need to hold everything to care. The small circle in Ren's palm faded before the evening meal. He noticed it while carrying a stack of clean cloths across the hall. At first, the mark had been clear, a soft, red curve where the pebble had pressed into the skin. Then it became lighter. Then it was almost gone. By the time he reached the sewing room, only the memory of the circle remained. The sewing room was narrow and warm. 3 low lamps burned along the wall, and the smell of hemp thread, cedar boxes, and old cloth filled the air. 2 monks sat mending winter robes, and beside them, to Ren's surprise, was a village woman he had never met. Her hair was tied back with a gray ribbon, and a basket of torn garments rested near her knees. She was sewing a child's sleeve with careful, even movements. The monk in charge of the room nodded toward Ren. "Set the cloths there." Ren placed them on a shelf and prepared to leave. But the woman looked up. "You are the young monk who brought medicine to Mother Sai," she said. "Yes." "She speaks well of you." Ren bowed, unsure where to put the kindness. The woman smiled and returned to the sleeve. "Do not worry. She speaks well of many people after medicine." The monks in the room smiled without lifting their heads. The lamps made small yellow pools on the floor. Outside, the winter light was already thinning, and the whole temple seemed to be moving toward evening again. Ren noticed the torn sleeve in the woman's hands. The cloth had ripped near the elbow, and she had placed a square patch over it. Her stitches were steady, but not quick. She pulled the thread through, smoothed the cloth with her thumb, and waited a breath before the next stitch. "Is it your child's robe?" Ren asked. "My son's," she said. "He tears everything. Robes, sandals, baskets, promises." There was no bitterness in her voice, only a tired warmth. Ren sat near the door, folding one of the clean cloths that had slipped from the pile. He watched the needle pass in and out, in and out. Each stitch joined what had opened. Yet the torn place did not vanish. The patch remained visible. The robe would not look new. It would only become wearable again. The woman held the sleeve up to the lamp and examined her work. Ren said quietly, "Does it trouble you that the patch shows?" She turned the cloth in her hands. "No. A hidden tear can widen. A seen patch can hold." The words entered him more sharply than he expected. A hidden tear can widen. a seen patch can hold. He thought of his brother again, and this time the thought did not circle like leaves in water. It appeared as cloth. Two brothers standing in a room years ago. A sentence pulled too hard, pride catching on pride, the fabric opening. Since then, Ren had tried to imagine a perfect repair, one so skillful that no sign of damage would remain. He'd wanted to write a letter that would erase the tear completely. But perhaps some repairs were not meant to make the cloth look untouched. Perhaps they were only meant to let warmth pass through again. The woman cut the thread with a small knife. Then she reached into the basket and took out another garment, this one an old coat with a burned edge near the cuff. She did not sigh. She did not complain about the number of things waiting. She simply placed the robe aside and lifted the coat into her lap. Ren watched her move from one piece of cloth to the next. "How do you not feel tired?" he asked. "Seeing how much there is to mend." She looked at the basket. "I do feel tired." Ren waited for more. She threaded the needle again. But tired hands can still make one stitch. The room became very quiet around that sentence. Not a grand quiet, a working quiet. Thread pulled through cloth. Breath moved through the chest. A lamp flame leaned, recovered, and stood upright again. Tired hands can still make one stitch. How different this was from the mind's demand to repair the whole life before resting. One stitch did not promise the whole basket would be empty. One honest word did not promise a relationship would become easy. One breath did not promise permanent peace. Yet one stitch was not nothing. It was care made small enough for tired hands. Tonight, if there is something torn in you, you do not have to mend the whole garment. You may only need to see the tear without hiding it from yourself. You may only need to place one small patch of kindness over the place that has been pulled thin. Not a performance, not a perfect apology in the dark, not a long argument with the past, just one soft acknowledgement. Yes, this hurt. Yes, this matters. Yes, it can wait until I am gentle enough to touch it wisely. Let your hands rest as if they have already made today's stitch. The fingers can uncurl. The wrists can become heavy. The arms can lie where they are, no longer reaching for the whole basket. Your chest does not need to hold every torn place open for inspection. Your belly can soften beneath the blanket. The back of the body can receive the bed, like cloth laid across a warm wooden table. Ren remained in the sewing room until the lamps were refilled. He did not speak of his brother. No one asked him to. The woman mended 3 more garments, each with a different patch. Dark blue over brown, gray over faded black, a small square of green inside a child's cuff where almost no one would see it. When the evening bell sounded, she gathered the finished pieces and left the rest in the basket. Ren looked at the unfinished garments. She noticed and said, "They will still be here tomorrow." For the first time, the sentence did not feel like a burden. It felt almost merciful. Tomorrow was not a threat. It was a shelf where some things could rest. The woman lifted her basket and bowed to the monks. Ren walked with her to the outer hall. Snowmelt dripped from the roof in slow intervals. The sky had turned the color of ash, and a single star had appeared above the gate. At the steps, She paused to adjust the basket on her arm. "Do you mend?" she asked. "Only badly," Wren said. "Good," she replied. "Bad menders learn patience. Perfect menders only learn pride." Then she went down toward the village, carrying patched robes, torn sleeves, and unfinished work under the first star. Wren stood until she disappeared between the pines. Inside his sleeve, his palm had no mark left from the pebble. But the hand remembered. One thing at a time. One stitch. The rest could wait in the basket. The basket remained in Wren's mind long after the woman had gone. Not as a burden now, but as an image. Torn sleeves resting beside finished robes. Work left undone without shame. A child's cuff waiting for green cloth. The idea felt simple while he stood beneath the evening sky. Yet when he returned to the main hall, another kind of waiting met him. A traveling scholar had arrived at the temple. He was not old, though he carried himself as if age had already disappointed him. His robe was dusty from the road. A long case of rolled papers hung at his side, and his hands were ink-stained from writing. He had come to speak with the abbot, but the abbot was away visiting a sick farmer in the upper valley. So the scholar sat beneath the outer eaves, drinking tea with the gatekeeper while dusk gathered around the courtyard. Wren was asked to bring a fresh lamp. When he entered, the scholar was speaking quickly. "I have walked 3 provinces," he said. "Every temple gives me a different answer. One says sit, one says chant, one says study, one says stop studying. One says the answer is in silence. But when I sit in silence, my mind becomes louder. I came here because I was told your abbot understands the matter directly." The gatekeeper poured more tea. "What matter?" he asked. The scholar looked almost offended by the smallness of the question. "The matter of the mind, how to quiet it, how to end its noise, how to know which thought is true and which is false, how to stop being carried by every passing thing." Wren set the lamp down carefully. The flame made a soft circle between them. Outside, the first insects of evening had begun to sing under the floorboards. The scholar unrolled one of his papers and showed it to the gatekeeper. It was covered with notes, diagrams, copied sayings, and questions written in narrow lines. "I have organized the teachings into 7 divisions, the scholar said. "If the abbot will only tell me which division contains the correct gate, I can continue properly." The gatekeeper looked at the paper for a long time. Then he lifted his tea bowl and turned it upside down. A single drop fell onto the wooden floor. The scholar stared at it. The gatekeeper placed the empty bowl beside the lamp. "The tea's finished," he said. The scholar waited. Wren waited too. But the gatekeeper said nothing more. At first, Wren felt disappointed for the traveler. Surely the old man could have offered one sentence, one direction, one kindness shaped like an answer. The scholar had walked far. His sandals were worn, his papers were heavy. His face held the gray tension of someone who had been searching for many nights. But then Wren saw the scholar's hand. It was still hovering over the paper, ready to point, ready to defend, ready to gather whatever came next. His whole body leaned toward the gatekeeper, as if the next word must become a bridge. When no word came, something in him had nowhere to go. The insects continued under the floor. The lamp burned steadily. The empty bowl rested without embarrassment. After a long silence, the scholar looked at the drop of tea on the floor. It had spread into the grain of the wood and lost its round shape. He looked at his papers, then at the gatekeeper, then at the darkening courtyard. "I do not understand," he said, but his voice was quieter. The gatekeeper nodded. "Good. Then that can wait too." The scholar frowned. "Understanding can wait?" "Sometimes understanding is the last guest to arrive," the gatekeeper said. "If you keep standing at the gate shouting for it, the other guests cannot enter." He picked up the empty bowl and handed it to Wren. "More hot water, please." Wren took the bowl and went to the kitchen. As he filled it, he thought of the scholar's papers. He knew that hunger, not the hunger for food, but the hunger for the one sentence that would finally make the mind obey, the perfect teaching, the perfect explanation, the correct gate, the final answer that would allow rest. But in the outer room, the gatekeeper had offered an empty bowl, a fallen drop, and a silence no one could arrange into a system. This too is a Zen kindness. Not every question must be answered at the moment it appears. Some questions are tired. Some are proud. Some are frightened children wearing scholars' robes. Some only need to sit near a lamp and stop being chased for a while. Tonight, there may be a question inside you that keeps asking to be completed. Why did this happen? What should I do? Who am I becoming? What if I choose wrongly? What if I never become calm? What if I cannot fix the mind with the mind? Let the question sit by the lamp. You do not have to push it away. You do not have to solve it. You do not have to dress it in wise words. You can let it be a traveler with dusty sandals, allowed to drink tea without being given the whole monastery. Feel the space around the question. Feel the bed under the body. Feel the eyelids growing heavier, not because everything is understood, but because understanding is no longer being dragged out by force. The forehead can loosen. The small muscles around the eyes can soften. The throat can rest from explaining. The chest can stop leaning forward toward the next answer. When Wren returned with hot water, the scholar had rolled up his papers, not put them away forever, only rolled them up for the evening. The gatekeeper filled the bowl and placed it in front of him. Steam rose between them, hiding and revealing his face. The scholar held the bowl with both hands, and for a while, no one spoke of the mind. They listened to the insects. They watched the lamp. They let the abbot remain absent, the papers remain closed, and the great matter remain unfinished beneath the patient roof. Later, as Wren carried the empty kettle back, he heard the scholar laugh once in the darkness. It was a small laugh, surprised and tired. Perhaps he had understood something. Perhaps he had not. Either way, the tea was warm, and the night, which had never asked for an answer, continued to open around them like a dark flower. Somewhere in the kitchen, water settled in a pot. Somewhere beyond the gate, the village dogs barked at nothing, then remembered sleep. Wren stood still for one breath longer than necessary, and in that breath he felt how gentle it was not to know. The scholar slept in the guest room beside the library. Wren knew this because he passed the door after evening chanting and saw the rolled papers resting outside, tied with a red cord. The scholar had placed them carefully against the wall, as if they too were tired from travel and needed a place to sleep. A small oil lamp burned near the threshold. Its flame moved whenever wind slipped through the corridor, but it did not go out. Wren paused only long enough to notice the papers, then continued toward the kitchen with a tray of empty cups. Inside, the cook was covering the rice jar with a cloth. The cat had returned from under the storehouse and now sat near the stove, washing the flour from one paw with great seriousness. The cook looked at Wren and pointed toward a wooden bowl of chestnuts. "Crack these before you sleep," she said. "Not all of them, only enough for morning porridge." Wren took the bowl to a low table near the back door. Outside, night had settled over the courtyard. The snow gave the darkness a soft brightness, and the roofs looked as if they were floating. The air smelled faintly of ash, cold pine, and the sweet skin of roasted grain left from supper. Somewhere beyond the wall, a fox cried once and was quiet. The chestnuts were hard, smooth, and dark. Wren held one against the table and pressed the small knife into its shell. The first one opened cleanly. The second slipped and rolled under the bench. The third cracked unevenly, leaving a sharp piece stuck beneath his nail. He worked slowly, remembering the cook's words. Not all of them, only enough. It seemed a small instruction, but it changed the whole task. If she had said, "Crack the chestnuts," Wren would have tried to finish the bowl. He would have counted them, hurried them, watched the pile with a tight mind, and perhaps gone to sleep with the feeling that a few stubborn shells had defeated him. But she had given him a boundary, enough for morning porridge. The rest could remain whole. And after a while, the scholar entered the kitchen doorway. His hair was loose from sleep, and his face had softened. Without the sharp energy of questioning, he looked younger. He stood uncertainly, as if he had forgotten why he had come. "I woke," he said, "and did not know what to do with myself." The cook, who was wiping the stove, said, "Good. Sit. Do nothing with yourself here." The scholar sat across from Wren. For some time he watched the chestnuts being cracked. The knife pressed, the shell opened, the pale inside appeared. One chestnut, then another, not quickly, not perfectly, only enough. "May I help?" the scholar asked. Wren offered him the knife. The scholar held a chestnut between his fingers and studied it as if it were a difficult text. Then he pressed too hard, and the shell broke into pieces. The cook did not look up. Morning porridge forgives ugly chestnuts. A small smile crossed the scholar's face. They worked together in silence. Wren noticed that the scholar's hands, which had seemed restless around paper, became calmer around chestnuts. There was no theory to arrange, no gate to locate. A shell was either opened or not opened. A kernel was either saved or crushed. Even a crushed one could still be used. After several minutes, the scholar said, "When I was young, my father sold ink. He used to tell me not to grind more than the brush could drink. I thought he was only speaking of ink." Wren placed another opened chestnut into the morning bowl. The scholar looked at the remaining pile. "I have spent many years grinding ink for letters I never wrote." No one answered. The kitchen did not require an answer. The cat slept. The stove settled. The bowl slowly filled. There is a kind of exhaustion that comes from preparing too much inside the mind. We grind ink for conversations that may never happen. We rehearse explanations for people who may never ask. We gather strength for disasters that may never arrive. We make ourselves ready, and ready, and ready, until the night is gone and the body has received no kindness. But the brush can drink only a little ink at a time. The morning porridge needs only enough chestnuts. Your life may contain many real things, but tonight your nervous body cannot digest all of them. It cannot hold every possible future and become peaceful at the same time. It cannot rehearse every answer and still enter sleep as a friend. It does not need to be scolded for this. It is not weak. It is honest. Perhaps right now, you can feel how much you have been preparing. Preparing to be judged. Preparing to be needed. Preparing to explain. Preparing to lose something. Preparing to succeed. Preparing to fail. Preparing to be disappointed. Preparing to be brave. Even preparing to rest, as if rest itself were another task that must be done correctly. Let some of the ink remain unground. Let some chestnuts stay in the bowl. The shoulders can lower without knowing what tomorrow will ask. The stomach can soften, no longer bracing for every imagined morning. The skin of the face can loosen. The eyes can rest back in their sockets. The hands, whether open or folded, can become ordinary hands again, not tools for holding the whole future. Wren and the scholar cracked chestnuts until the cook came over, looked into the bowl, and said, "Enough." The word fell gently, but both men stopped at once. Enough. It was not a command to become smaller. It was permission to stop before care turned into strain. The scholar looked at the remaining chestnuts. "Should we put the rest away?" "They are already away," the cook said. "They are in the bowl where they belong." Wren understood. The unfinished chestnuts were not a failure. They were stored possibility. They would wait without complaint until another morning asked for them. The scholar tied his hair back and rose. Before leaving, he touched the red cord around his papers, then did not untie it. He bowed to the cook, to Wren, and, strangely, to the bowl of whole chestnuts. When he had gone, Wren carried the cracked ones to the shelf near the rice jar. The kitchen lamp made their pale surfaces shine softly. Behind them, the untouched chestnuts rested in the larger bowl, dark and quiet. Some answers, he thought, are not late. They are simply still in their shells. Some answers, still in their shells, made the night feel less empty. Wren slept more deeply than he expected. Not perfectly, not without dreams, but the sleep came in long, quiet waves. Once he woke and heard wind moving under the eaves. Once he turned and felt the cold edge of the blanket near his feet. Once the thought of his brother rose in him, familiar and heavy, but it did not become a letter. It was only a shape in the dark. He touched it with attention, as one might touch a closed chestnut in a bowl, and let it remain unopened. By dawn, the temple had changed again. The snow that had seemed so complete the day before now held tracks from birds, monks, cats, and dripping roofs. Thin ice shone along the stone steps. Smoke rose straight from the kitchen chimney, which meant the morning air was very still. Somewhere in the storage room, a mouse knocked something small from a shelf and escaped before anyone could blame it. Wren was sent with 2 other monks to gather fallen branches from the pine slope above the temple. The slope was steep, but not dangerous if one walked slowly. They carried rope, a hand saw, and 3 woven back baskets. The oldest monk among them, Jiro, had a bent back and a cheerful face that made him look as if he had spent many years forgiving the weather. He did not speak much. When he did, his words usually came after the need for them had almost passed. They climbed in single file. The pines stood dark against the morning. Snow slipped from their needles in sudden whispers. The earth smelled of wet bark, old leaves, and stone. Ren's breath showed in front of him, then disappeared. His hands were wrapped in cloth, but the cold still found his fingers. At the upper slope, many branches had fallen under the weight of snow. Some were dry enough for kindling. Some were green and heavy. Some were tangled beneath others. Ren wanted to gather quickly. He wanted to fill his basket well, to prove useful, to return before the sun softened the path into mud. He bent to pull a long branch from beneath a fallen pine limb. It did not move. He pulled harder. The branch shifted a little, then caught again. Snow dropped from the limb above and slid down the back of his neck. He tightened his grip, planted one foot against a stone, and pulled with both hands. The branch gave a sharp crack, but still did not come free. Jiro, who was tying smaller sticks together nearby, looked over. "That one is held," he said. Ren breathed out through his nose. "I can free it." "Perhaps." The old monk returned to his bundle. Ren pulled again. The branch twisted, scraped, and jammed more deeply under the fallen limb. His shoulders began to ache. His jaw set itself without permission. He knew somewhere that many other branches lay nearby, loose and ready. But now this one branch had become a question. If he left it, the leaving would feel like defeat. Jiro finished his bundle and came to stand beside him. "What do you need?" he asked. "This branch." Jiro looked at the slope where dozens of branches rested in the snow. "This branch?" Ren heard himself and felt heat rise in his face. Jiro knelt, brushed snow from the trapped place, and showed him how the branch had grown under pressure. It was hooked beneath two heavier limbs and frozen into the ground at one end. "It may come free at noon," Jiro said, "or in spring, or not at all. But that one beside your foot is ready." Ren looked down. A clean, dry branch lay almost touching his sandal. For a moment, his mind resisted the simplicity of it. It wanted the difficult branch because it had already spent effort there. It wanted success where struggle had begun. It wanted the world to reward force with release. Then he picked up the branch at his foot. It lifted easily. The old monk smiled, but only with his eyes. The forest gives enough without surrendering everything. They continued gathering. Ren placed the easy branch in his basket, then another, then several small sticks that had been hidden under snow. The trapped branch remained where it was. No thunder sounded. No lesson announced itself. The morning did not become less complete because one branch stayed held. There is a deep tiredness in trying to free what is not ready to move. A person who cannot hear you yet. A decision whose time has not come. A grief that will not soften simply because you pull on it. A fear that tightens more when argued with. A future that refuses to open before its season. The mind may take hold and say, this one must move now. But sometimes the wiser work is nearby, quiet, and almost touching your foot. Tonight, notice whether you have been pulling on something frozen. Maybe you have spent your strength trying to make a feeling disappear. Maybe you have tried to make someone understand you in an imagined conversation. Maybe you have pressed the mind towards certainty and found it only more tangled. There is no shame in this. The hand reaches because it cares. The heart pulls because it wants relief. But the body can be invited to stop pulling now. Let the shoulders know they do not have to drag the whole forest loose. Let the elbows become heavy. Let the fingers open slightly, as if releasing a branch that will not come today. The breath can move down into the ribs. The belly can soften under its own quiet warmth. The legs can rest, no longer braced against the stone. Something else may be ready. Not the whole answer, not the full repair, only the next gentle thing. A sip of water, a slower breath, a hand resting on the blanket, the permission to sleep before spring arrives, inside every frozen place. By the time the baskets were filled, the sun had reached the upper branches. Drops fell all around them, bright and sudden. Wren looked once more at the trapped branch. It had not moved, but the ice around it was shining. Jiro lifted his basket onto his back. "Will you come?" he asked. Wren nodded. He followed the others down the slope, carrying enough wood for the morning fire. The fire would not know which branch had been refused. It would only warm what had been brought. The fire accepted what had been brought. By mid-morning, the branches Wren and the others had gathered were stacked beside the kitchen wall. Some were thin enough to break by hand. Some needed the small axe. A few were damp and would have to dry before they could burn cleanly. The cook inspected the pile as if reading a weather report written in wood. "This will do," she said. Wren heard the words with quiet relief. This will do. Not, this is perfect. Not, this is all we will ever need. Only enough for the next round of warmth, enough for porridge, enough for the kettle, enough for the hands that would gather near the stove before dawn. He carried 3 dry sticks inside and placed them beside the hearth. The old ashes from the morning fire were pale and soft. Beneath them, one coal still glowed, almost hidden, red at its center. The cook knelt, leaned close, and blew gently. The coal brightened. She placed one thin stick over it, then another, then a twist of dry grass. Nothing happened at once. Wren watched the smoke curl, hesitate, and slip sideways. The cook did not blow harder. She did not poke the coal impatiently. She waited until the grass darkened, then glowed, then opened into a small yellow flame. "Too much breath kills a little fire," she said. Wren thought she was speaking to the hearth, but perhaps she was speaking to him. The flame caught the first stick, then the second. Warmth slowly entered the room. A kettle was placed above it. Soon the iron began to make tiny sounds, as if water had started speaking in its sleep. The trapped branch on the slope returned to Wren's mind. He imagined it still there, held under ice, while this small fire was already warming the kitchen without it. The thought surprised him. He had believed the difficult branch mattered because it resisted him. But the fire did not measure importance by struggle. It used what was ready. So much of the mind's unrest comes from this confusion. We think the thing that resists us must be the central thing, the unanswered message, the person who will not understand, the fear that will not soften, the plan that will not become clear. Because it refuses to move, we give it more and more of our strength. We forget the ready branch at our feet. We forget the small coal still alive under ash. We forget the ordinary warmth that can begin with less than we imagined. Tonight, perhaps there is one place in your life where you have been blowing too hard. You have been trying to make peace arrive faster, trying to make grief become wise before it has finished being grief, trying to make the body relax by commanding it, trying to make the mind quiet by pressing it down. And perhaps the harder you have blown, the more the little flame has bent away. Let the breath become kinder. Not deep because someone told it to be deep. Not slow because sleep must be captured. Just kind. A breath that approaches the body the way the cook approached the coal. Close enough to help, gentle enough not to scatter the ash. Inhaling, the body receives a little air. Exhaling, the body releases what it can. Nothing more is required. The kettle began to steam. The cook poured hot water over tea leaves in a clay pot and covered it with a chipped lid. Then she gave Wren a small task: carry a cup to the scholar in the guest room. Wren took the cup carefully through the corridor. The paper walls held the pale light of late morning. From the library came the dry sound of pages being moved. Outside the guest room, the scholar's ruled papers were no longer tied. They lay open across the floor in a wide fan. But the scholar himself was not writing. He sat with one sheet on his knees, looking at it without touching the brush. Wren placed the cup beside him. The scholar looked up. "I dreamed of chestnuts," he said. Wren smiled. "Were they open?" "Some were. Some were not. In the dream, I was angry at the closed ones. Then a cat carried one away, and I woke feeling I had been defeated by a wiser creature." At that moment, the temple cat appeared in the corridor, as if summoned by insult, and walked calmly over one corner of the scholar's notes. A black paw print of ash marked the paper. The scholar stared. Wren held his breath, expecting distress. The paper was carefully written. The paw print crossed a line of tiny characters. The cat sat down on another sheet and began washing its shoulder. For a long moment, the scholar did not move. Then he took the marked paper, held it near the window, and looked at the print. "It has improved the page," he said at last. Wren laughed before he could stop himself. The scholar laughed too, quietly, with wonder. He dipped his brush in water and copied the shape of the paw print onto a clean scrap. Not as a doctrine, not as a symbol to explain, only because it was there, soft and dark and perfectly unplanned. "Yesterday," the scholar said, "I would have tried to remove it." "And today?" Wren asked. "Today, I may let the cat be part of the teaching." The cat, having no interest in being a teacher, left the room. There is a kind of quiet that comes when life is allowed to touch the page. Not every mark is damage. Not every interruption is failure. Sometimes the mind becomes loud because it is defending a clean sheet that no real day has ever promised to preserve. Your own night may have paw prints on it. A sound outside. a thought that returns, a worry crossing the neat page of rest, a memory sitting exactly where silence was supposed to be. But perhaps this does not ruin the night. Perhaps it only shows that life is here too, wandering through, leaving a soft mark, then moving on. You do not have to erase every print before sleeping. Let the room be as it is. Let the body be as it is. Let the mind have one or two marks of the day without making them into a battle. The bed can still hold you. The breath can still warm you. The hidden coal can still glow under ash. Down in the kitchen, the fire had grown steady. It did not need the trapped branch. It did not need a perfect page. It needed only what was ready to burn. What was ready to burn became warmth. By afternoon, the temple had a different quiet. Morning work had passed into its results. The kitchen smelled of chestnut porridge and wood smoke. The mats near the stove had dried enough to be rolled. The guest room papers, paw print and all, were gathered into a loose stack. Outside, the courtyard stones showed through the melting snow like old thoughts appearing after a long, white silence. Wren carried ash from the hearth to the garden path. The ash bucket was lighter than water, but more awkward. If he walked too quickly, gray dust lifted and touched his sleeves. If he held the bucket too close, the smell of old smoke filled his nose. He followed the small path behind the kitchen, past the plum tree, to the vegetable beds where winter cabbages waited under straw covers. There, an old gardener named Matsu was turning soil with a short-handled hoe. Matsu was not a monk. He had lived near the temple since before Wren arrived, perhaps before Wren was born. No one seemed certain. He came and went through the back gate, speaking to plants more often than people. His eyebrows were wild, his boots were always muddy, and he treated every season as if it were both a guest and a teacher who could not be rushed. Wren set the ash bucket beside him. "The cook said this is for the beds." Matsu nodded. "Good. The fire is finished with it. The soil is not." Wren looked into the bucket. The ash was pale, soft, and almost weightless. It was difficult to connect it with the bright sticks that had warmed the kitchen that morning. Fire had seemed so alive. Ash seemed like an ending. Matsu took a wooden scoop and scattered a little gray powder along the edge of the bed. The ash darkened where it touched wet earth. A faint steam rose and vanished. "Not too much," Matsu said. "Even what helps can harm when poured without listening." Wren crouched beside him and watched the ash disappear into the soil. He thought of his own efforts to calm the mind. Sometimes even useful teachings became too much when poured everywhere. A sentence that helped in the morning could become a burden by night if he repeated it too tightly. A practice meant to soften him could become another way to measure himself. Even the thought, "everything can wait," could become something sharp if he used it to avoid what truly needed care. Matsu handed him the scoop. "Here," he said. "Give the earth a little smoke from yesterday." Wren took the scoop and scattered ash between two rows of winter greens. He expected the work to feel mournful, but it did not. The ash was not being thrown away. It was returning. What had burned was not being asked to become wood again. It was allowed to become something quieter. A crow called from the wall. Matsu leaned on his hoe. People dislike endings because they look only at the shape that disappeared. Wren looked at the beds. And what should they look at? The place where the ending is allowed to feed something. The old gardener bent and covered a tender cabbage with straw. He did it with both hands, carefully, as if tucking in the sleeping child. This opened another small door in Ren. Maybe an unfinished matter was not always waiting to be completed in its old form. Maybe some things waited because they were changing shape. Anger cooling into honesty, regret softening into humility. A failed conversation becoming a future apology. A busy day becoming sleep. A burned branch becoming ash. Ash becoming soil. Soil waiting under winter for a green thing that had not yet shown itself. Not everything that waits is stuck. Some waiting is hidden change. Tonight, if there is something in you that feels like ash, you do not have to make it bright again. You do not have to turn old warmth back into wood. A day that is over can be over. A version of yourself that was trying too hard can lie down. A worry that has burned through its first fierce heat can settle into something quieter. Let the body feel the mercy of not returning to what has already burned. The eyes can soften behind the lids. The mouth can rest without forming another explanation. The chest can feel the breath move like a small wind over cooling coals. The belly can release the effort to make every ending useful immediately. Even the heart can be a winter bed for a while, covered gently, not forced to bloom before its season. Ren and Matsu worked until the ash bucket was nearly empty. They moved slowly from bed to bed. Matsu sometimes spoke to the cabbages. Sometimes he said nothing for so long that Ren forgot to expect words. The silence was not empty. It was full of tiny sounds. The scrape of the hoe, the dry whisper of straw, the wet give of soil under the scoop, a bird shaking water from a branch. At last, Ren looked into the bucket and saw only a thin gray ring at the bottom. "Should I clean it completely?" he asked. Matsu shook his head. "A little ash in an ash bucket is not a problem." Ren smiled. The sentence felt like it belonged in many places. A little sadness in a human heart is not a problem. A little unfinished work in a life is not a problem. A little thought moving through the mind at night is not a problem. The trouble begins when we believe the bucket must shine before it can be set down. They carried the bucket back toward the kitchen. Near the door, Matsu stopped to look at the sky. The clouds had thinned and blue showed through in a quiet opening above the roof. "Tomorrow may be clear," Ren said. "Or not," Matsu replied. He said it without disappointment. Ren looked at the pale bucket in his hands, the garden behind him, the smoke rising ahead, and the sky that had not decided what tomorrow would be. For once, the uncertainty did not feel like an enemy. It felt like weather still far away. Ren listened to that patience and felt his own hurry become smaller. The garden was not asleep because it had failed. It was asleep because sleep was part of how living things continue. Even roots know how to wait in darkness. The ash had been given to the soil. The soil would take its time, and the garden, sleeping under straw, did not need to explain how it was changing. The garden did not explain how it was changing. and perhaps that was why Wren trusted it. For several days, winter held the temple in a quiet hand. The snow thinned on the roofs, then returned at night in small, silent layers. The paths froze, melted, and froze again. Smoke rose from the kitchen in the mornings, and by afternoon the air smelled faintly of wet straw, ash, and pine. The scholar stayed longer than he had planned. The woman from the sewing room came twice more with her basket. Matsu covered and uncovered the cabbage beds according to signs only he seemed able to read. Wren moved through these days with less rushing, but not with perfect peace. This mattered. Sometimes, after a calm morning, his mind still tightened without warning. Sometimes, while carrying water, he remembered his brother and felt the old heat return. Sometimes, in the hall at night, he heard laughter from another room and wondered whether people were speaking of him. Sometimes, while trying to sleep, he began counting tasks again. Oil jars, wood bundles, cracked bowls, torn mats, the loose peg, the letter, the branch, the scholar's papers, the offerings, the ash bucket. But something had changed in the way he met the tightening. Before, each returning thought had seemed like proof that he had failed to become quiet. Now, it was more like weather crossing the same mountain. Unpleasant, perhaps. Familiar, certainly. But not a verdict. A cloud could return without meaning the sky had been ruined. One late afternoon, the abbot returned from the upper valley. He was a small man with a weathered face and eyes that seemed to rest on things without taking them. His robe was travel-stained. A strip of bark was caught near the hem. He carried no visible authority beyond a walking staff and a tired kindness. When he entered the courtyard, no one rushed toward him dramatically. The cook called from the kitchen that soup was nearly ready. The gatekeeper took his staff. The scholar bowed so deeply that his forehead nearly touched the wet stones. The abbot looked at the scholar and said, "You have been well fed?" The scholar blinked. Perhaps he had expected a question about enlightenment. "Yes, very well." "Then the temple has not failed you," the abbot said, and went to wash his hands. Wren saw the scholar stand there, caught between disappointment and laughter. Then the scholar laughed, quietly, as if some knot in him had loosened one more thread. That evening, after the meal, the abbot sat on the veranda outside the main hall. The sky was clear at last. Stars appeared between black pine branches, and the moon, not full, rested above the far ridge like a bowl tilted slightly to one side. Wren brought hot water and placed it near him. The abbot looked at the moon. "You have been busy while I was away." Wren lowered his eyes. "Yes. And your mind?" Wren almost answered too quickly. He almost said, "Calmer." He almost said, "Still troubled." He almost tried to give the correct report. Instead, he looked toward the garden, where the winter beds lay under straw. "It changes," he said. The abbot nodded. "Good. Then it is alive." They sat without speaking for a while. From the kitchen came the faint sound of bowls being stacked. From the guest room came one cough from the scholar. Somewhere under the veranda, an insect made one thin note, then stopped as if reconsidering winter. The moonlight touched the edge of the ash bucket, which had been rinsed but not perfectly clean. Wren said, "When thoughts return, I still feel I should do something." The abbot held his cup in both hands. "Sometimes do something, sometimes do nothing. The trouble is wanting one rule to protect you from listening. Ren felt those words move through him slowly. The trouble is wanting one rule. He saw how even his new understanding could become another broom, another list, another branch to pull. Everything can wait could become a rule. One thing at a time could become a rule. Enough could become a rule. The mind was clever. It could turn even medicine into another thing to carry. "How do I know?" Ren asked. The abbot tilted his cup slightly. Steam rose and disappeared. "You may not know at once. That too can wait." Ren looked at him. The abbot smiled. "When the house is burning, carry water. When the child is crying, bend down. When the mind is telling old stories to itself in the dark, let the storyteller grow tired. Listening is not the same as obeying. Waiting is not the same as refusing. Rest is not the same as forgetting." The moon moved behind a thin branch. For a moment, it seemed divided by the black line of wood. Then the wind moved the branch, and the moon was whole again, though of course it had never been cut. Perhaps this is the middle place where quiet becomes wise. Not everything can wait in the same way. Some things ask for care. Some ask for patience. Some ask only to be noticed and allowed to pass. The art is not to make the mind empty by force. The art is to become gentle enough to hear the difference. Tonight, you do not have to decide the whole difference perfectly. You can begin with the body. Is there anything here, in this room, in this breath, that truly needs your action before sleep? If there is, may it be simple and kind. A glass of water, a warmer blanket, a door checked once, a note written briefly and left for morning. And if there is no true flame, only the glow of many imagined fires, then perhaps the work is to lie down more fully. Let the bed be the veranda beneath you. Let the night be the clear sky beyond the pines. Let thoughts appear like branches across the moon. They may seem to divide the light, but they do not cut it. They move, and the moon remains. Your breath does not need one rule. Your heart does not need perfect certainty. The mind may change because it is alive, and still you may rest. Ren bowed to the abbot before leaving. As he walked back through the corridor, he did not feel finished. He felt accompanied by something quieter than an answer. The moonlight crossed the floorboards in pale bars. He stepped through them one by one, not trying to keep any of them, not trying to reach the last one before its time. The night was already taking care of the dark. The night was already taking care of the dark, and Ren began to feel how little darkness needed from him. Still, the next morning brought rain. Not snow this time. Rain. Thin, cold, and steady. It tapped on the temple roof with thousands of small fingers. It ran down the chains beside the eaves. It darkened the stone steps and made the pine trunks shine black. The courtyard became a mirror broken by falling drops. The rain changed the work of the temple. Mats stayed inside. Firewood was covered. The garden paths grew soft. The villagers came less often. Even the cat decided that wisdom belonged near the stove and nowhere else. Ren was sent to the old storehouse to help sort rice sacks. The storehouse stood at the back of the temple, where the hill rose behind it in a wall of wet grass and roots. Inside, the air was cool and dry. Wooden shelves lined the walls. Clay jars stood in rows. Bundles of paper, spare sandals, winter straw, and broken tools waited in corners where time moved slowly. An older nun from a nearby hermitage had come to help with the sorting. Her name was Emma. She visited only a few times each year, usually when rain made travel unpleasant for everyone else. She was small, with clear eyes and hands that moved like birds landing. She wore a plain gray robe, and when she stepped into the storehouse, even the dust seemed to settle more respectfully. Together, she and Ren lifted the rice sacks from one side of the room to the other. Some were full and firm. Some had loosened at the seam. One had a small tear where a mouse had tasted the corner and decided the temple's generosity should include mice. Ren noticed the tear and immediately reached for twine. Emma touched his wrist lightly. "Wait," she said. Ren froze, holding the twine in one hand. She bent near the sack, looked at the tear, then looked around the floor. Only a few grains had fallen. She picked them up one by one and placed them in a small bowl. "Now we mend," she said. Ren watched as she threaded a thick needle. Her movements were slow, but not delayed. Nothing in her felt rushed, and nothing in her felt careless. She waited before acting, but when action came, it came completely. He thought of the abbot's words from the night before. Listening is not the same as obeying. Waiting is not the same as refusing. The rain tapped on the roof. Emma pushed the needle through the sackcloth. The coarse fibers resisted, then allowed the thread. She made 3 firm stitches, tied the end, and pressed the seam with her thumb. "There," she said. Ren looked at the bowl of rescued grains. "Why pick up those first?" Emma handed him the bowl. "Because they had already fallen." The answer was so plain that Ren almost missed it. The sack still needed mending, yes, but the fallen grains were already on the floor. If they were left there, they might be stepped on, swept away, or found by mice. The tear mattered, the cause mattered, but the small thing already lost also deserved care. Ren held the bowl and felt the quiet precision of this. Some moments do ask for action. Not frantic action, not action born from fear, but simple care for what has already fallen. Emma moved to another sack. "People often stare at the tear," she said, "and forget the grain." All morning, that sentence worked in Ren like rain entering soil. He thought of his brother again. For so long he had stared at the tear between them. Who had caused it? How wide it was? How to close it forever? Whether the cloth would ever look whole again? But perhaps there were fallen grains too. One kindness he had not thanked, one pain he had not admitted, one small truth he could pick up without repairing the entire past. Not the whole letter, not the whole relationship. Perhaps only one sentence. I spoke harshly. Or, "I remember the winter you stayed." Or, "I do not yet know how to mend this, but I have stopped pretending there is no tear." A single grain is not the whole harvest, but it is not nothing. Tonight, if there is something torn in your life, you may not need to fix the whole fabric in the dark. You may simply notice one fallen grain of truth. Something small, honest, and near. Not to solve everything, not to open the whole sack and count what remains, just to honor what is already visible. Maybe the grain is this: I am tired. Maybe it is this: I miss someone. Maybe it is this: I cannot decide tonight. Maybe it is this: I need rest before wisdom. Hold only that one grain gently. Let it be small enough for the hand of the heart. The jaw does not need to tighten around the whole story. The eyes do not need to search the dark room for every answer. The shoulders can lower, as if the heavy sack has been set beside the wall. The hands can rest open, holding only what has already fallen into awareness. Rain continued through noon. When the rice sacks had been sorted, Ima swept the floor with a short broom. She did not sweep quickly. She moved dust, straw, and a few broken husks into a small pile near the door. Then she opened the door and let the damp air in. The courtyard beyond the storehouse was silver with rain. Drops struck puddles and rose again in tiny crowns. The sound was steady, without beginning or end. Ren stood beside Emma and watched water run from the roof. "So much falls," he said. Emma leaned on the broom. "Yes, and not all falling is loss." A drop gathered at the edge of the eave, swelled, trembled, and let go. It fell into the puddle below and vanished into the larger water. Ren followed it with his eyes. There was no way to mend a raindrop back to the roof. No need. Its falling was its path. The roof did not fail by releasing it. The puddle did not boast by receiving it. The drop did not ask to be remembered separately. For a moment, Ren felt something inside him loosen around all the things he could not hold in place. The day would fall into evening. A thought would fall into silence. A sentence would fall onto paper when ready. A breath would fall out of the body and another would come. Some grains should be picked up. Some drops should simply be allowed to join the rain. Emma closed the storehouse door. Inside, the rice sacks waited in better order. Outside, the rain kept doing what rain does best. Inside, the rice sacks waited in better order. Outside, the rain kept doing what rain does best. By evening, it had softened the whole temple. The stone steps shone. The wooden railings smelled of wet cedar. Water gathered in the hollows of old roof tiles and spilled when the wind touched them. The distant mountains had vanished behind gray mist, so the world felt smaller, almost held inside the sound of falling water. After supper, the abbot asked Ren to bring a lantern to the small shrine near the back pond. The pond was not far, but in rain it felt like another country. Ren carried the lantern beneath his sleeve, guarding the flame from the wet air. The path curved behind the garden, past the storehouse, past the plum tree, down to a place where moss grew thick between stones and frogs hid in warmer months. Now the pond was dark and full, its surface alive with rings. The shrine was simple: a low roof, a stone basin, and a wooden figure worn smooth by years of weather and hands. Ren placed the lantern inside and watched the light open slowly across the wet wood. The flame reflected in the basin, shaking whenever a raindrop touched the water. He was about to leave when he noticed the scholar standing beneath a pine nearby. The scholar had no umbrella. His robe was damp at the shoulders. His papers, for once, were nowhere in sight. He stood with his face lifted slightly, letting rain touch his forehead. Ren stepped closer. "You will be soaked." "I already am," the scholar said. The answer was so plain that Ren did not know how to improve it. They stood together under the pine. The branches softened the rain, but did not stop it. Drops fell from needle to needle before landing on their sleeves. The pond received them all without choosing. After a while, the scholar said, "I thought quiet would feel like victory." Ren listened. "I imagined that one day the mind would kneel, and I would stand over it holding the correct teaching." He smiled faintly. A very peaceful kind of conquest. The rain made small circles on the pond. "And now?" Ren asked. "Now I think quiet may be less like victory and more like being too tired to fight the rain." Ren looked at the lantern in the shrine. Its flame leaned, straightened, leaned again. It did not defeat the darkness around it. It only burned where it had been placed. The scholar reached into his sleeve and took out a small piece of paper, folded many times. Rain had softened the edges. He held it, but did not open it. "This is the question I carried here," he said. "I wrote it before leaving home. I thought if a teacher answered it, my life would begin properly." "What is the question?" Ren asked. The scholar looked toward the pond. "I no longer know if I want to read it tonight." Ren felt the strange tenderness of that. A question carried across 3 provinces, now allowed to remain folded in the rain. The scholar placed the paper under the shrine roof beside the lantern. "It can dry there." They both watched the folded paper become part of the small scene. Lantern, basin, wet wood, old figure, rain. It had not been destroyed. It had not been answered. It had only been given a place where it did not have to be held. There are questions like that inside the human heart. They have traveled far with you. They may have been written in a season of fear, loneliness, ambition, grief, or shame. You may have believed that until they were answered, your life could not begin. Why am I like this? When will I be safe? What should I become? How do I stop hurting? How do I know I have done enough? Such questions deserve kindness. But kindness is not always the same as immediate answering. Sometimes kindness is placing the folded question under a small roof for the night, letting it dry, letting the rain pass, letting the body stop being the only place where it is carried. Feel this gently now. Perhaps there is one folded question in you. You do not need to unfold it. You do not need to read it again. You do not need to solve it before sleep proves you worthy of rest. You can imagine setting it down beside a quiet lantern where it is safe enough, seen enough, and no longer pressing against the ribs. Let the ribs soften around the breath. Let the chest know it is not a shrine shelf for every question. Let the throat release the words it has been preparing. Let the tongue rest behind the teeth. Let the brow smooth, as if rain were touching it, without asking for a response. The The mind may still hear drops falling, but it does not have to count them. Ren thought of his brother, not as a letter now, not as a tear, a branch, a grain, or a flame, only as a folded question he had carried too close to the body. He did not put his brother away. He did not decide anything final. He only imagined placing the question of him under a small roof near a lantern where it could dry before being opened. The scholar bowed to the shrine, then to the pond, then, almost awkwardly, to Ren. "I may leave tomorrow," he said. "Have you found what you came for?" Ren asked. The scholar looked at the folded paper. "No." Then he smiled. "And I may leave it here until morning." They walked back together through the rain. Neither hurried. The lantern behind them glowed faintly through the trees, a small amber point in the wet dark. By the time they reached the veranda, Ren's sleeves were damp and his feet were cold, but his chest felt strangely light. At the veranda, the cook saw them and shook her head, but she brought 2 dry cloths without scolding. The scholar took one and laughed softly into it. Ren dried his hands and noticed how good it felt to do only this: cloth against skin, water leaving slowly, warmth returning by degrees. No thought had to become useful, no feeling had to announce its meaning. Even the body, when allowed, knew how to come back from rain, one small surface at a time. The rain had not stopped that night. The question had not opened. And still, the path had been walkable. And still, the path had been walkable. The next morning, the rain finally thinned. It did not stop all at once. It loosened slowly, as if even the sky did not wish to make a dramatic announcement. First, the heavy sound on the roof softened. Then the drops from the eaves grew farther apart. Then a pale brightness moved behind the clouds. Not yet sunlight, but the memory of sunlight returning. Ren woke before the bell. For a while, he lay on his mat and listened. Water still fell from leaves. Somewhere in the corridor, a monk turned in sleep. Far away, a rooster in the village called once, then seemed to doubt the hour and went silent. The air smelled of damp straw, cold earth, and the faint smoke that had settled into every wooden beam of the temple. He thought of the folded question under the shrine roof. Then he thought of his brother. The old tightening began, but quietly. Not like a fire catching, more like a hand closing by habit around something it had carried for a long time. Ren noticed it. He did not scold it. He did not call it wisdom or foolishness. He simply felt the closing. After the morning bell, he went to the shrine by the pond. The path was wet and dark. The moss shone. The pond was full to its edges, with pale rings still widening from the last drops falling from branches. The lantern had burned out during the night, leaving a faint smell of smoke beneath the small roof. Beside it, the scholar's folded paper rested where he had placed it. The rain had reached only one corner, and that corner had curled slightly as it dried. The scholar arrived a few moments later, carrying 2 cups of hot water. He gave one to Ren and looked at the paper. "It survived," Ren said. "Yes," the scholar answered, "though not unchanged." He picked it up gently. The folded paper had softened at the edges. The ink inside, if there was ink inside, might have blurred. The question might still be readable, or not. The scholar held it in both hands for a long time.
"Will you open it?"
Wren asked. The scholar smiled. "I thought I would know when morning came." "And do you?" "No. But I know I do not need to know while the water is still warm." They drank by the pond. Mist moved over the surface like a thought that had forgotten what it wanted to become. A bird landed on the shrine roof, shook itself, and flew away. The curled corner of the paper lifted in the breeze and settled again. After a while, the scholar tucked the folded question into his sleeve. "I will carry it differently," he said. Wren understood this without asking. Some things are not put down forever. Some questions, some memories, some loves, some regrets must still travel with us. But they do not have to be carried against the heart like a hidden wound. They can be carried like a folded paper in the sleeve. Present but not pressing. Close but not ruling the breath. The scholar left the pond first. Wren remained a little longer, looking at the extinguished lantern. It seemed strange that the lantern could be empty and still beautiful. The flame had gone. The cup of oil was nearly dry. A little soot marked the wooden frame. Yet the place where light had been still felt gentle. Nothing demanded that the flame continue beyond its oil. No one accused it of failing the darkness. A thought can be like that. It can burn for a while, give what it can give, and go out. A feeling can fill the chest for a night, then become only a trace of warmth in the morning. An urgency can seem bright and necessary, then fade when the oil is spent. The mind suffers when it tries to keep every flame alive by feeding it with fear. Tonight, if an old thought comes back, you do not need to pour more oil into it. You may notice whether it is still truly burning, or whether it is only smoke from something already finished. You may let the smoke thin. You may let the lantern be empty. The room can be safe without every light being lit. The body can rest without every feeling being maintained. Let the face soften as a lantern after dawn. Let the forehead cool. Let the eyes rest in their dark, not forced to watch every inner flame. The mouth can loosen. The neck can release. The shoulders can drop away from the ears as if they are no longer holding the roof of the night. Wren carried the empty lantern back to the temple. In the courtyard, work had begun. The gatekeeper was scraping mud from the stone steps with a flat piece of wood. The cook was hanging damp cloth near the kitchen door. Matsu stood in the garden examining the cabbage beds after rain. The abbot sat beneath the veranda writing a short note on a narrow strip of paper. Wren paused when he saw the brush in the abbot's hand. The abbot looked up. "You have a question?" Wren almost denied it, but smiled instead. "I may have a letter." "To your brother?" Wren nodded. The abbot returned the brush to the inkstone. "Then do not write the whole past. It will not fit on paper." Wren sat beside him. The empty lantern rested between them. "What should I write?" Wren asked. The abbot slid a blank strip toward him. "Write the part that is ready to be honest. Leave the rest in the garden." Wren held the brush. For a moment, many sentences crowded near the doorway of his mind. Defenses, explanations, old scenes, correct memories, injured pride, desire to be understood. desire to be forgiven before he had even asked. Then he looked at the wet courtyard, the empty lantern, the abbot's quiet hands, and the blank strip of paper. He wrote only one line. "I have been carrying our last words too tightly." He stopped. The line looked small, almost too small after so many years of inner speech. But it was true. It did not accuse. It did not explain everything. It did not demand an answer. It was only a door opened a little. The abbot read it and nodded. "That can travel." Wren placed the brush down. For the first time, the unwritten rest did not feel like failure. It felt like space around the truth. The letter could wait after one honest line. The brother could wait after one gentle opening. The heart could wait after one breath that did not push itself forward. The path had been walkable. The question had dried, and one small sentence was enough to begin without finishing. One small sentence was enough to begin without finishing. The abbot did not ask Wren to add another. He simply waited while the ink dried. The narrow strip of paper rested on the veranda floor between them. The words were plain, almost fragile in their blackness. "I have been carrying our last words too tightly." The morning light reached the edge of the paper and stopped there. A drop of water fell from the roof into the courtyard. Somewhere behind the kitchen, the cat complained at a closed door and then found another door more suitable to its dignity. Wren looked at what he had written until the words no longer seemed like words, but like a small bridge laid across a deep place. "It is not enough," he said. The abbot lifted the cup beside him. "Enough for what?" Wren opened his mouth and discovered several answers waiting. Enough to explain. Enough to be forgiven. Enough to make his brother understand. Enough to prove he had changed. Enough to protect him from being hurt again. Enough to finish what had remained unfinished for years. He saw, before speaking, how large a burden he had placed on one small sentence. The abbot sipped his water. "A bridge does not need to be the whole journey." Wren looked again at the strip of paper. "A bridge does not need to be the whole journey." For a long time, he had waited to write because he wanted the letter to carry everything: regret, defense, memory, affection, pain, explanation, apology, and hope. He wanted the letter to arrive as a complete repair, like a patched robe with no visible seam. But no strip of paper could do that. Perhaps no human voice could do that in one attempt. The abbot reached for a small wooden box and opened it. Inside were many narrow strips, each with only a few words written on them. Some were names of villagers who had asked to be remembered. Some were reminders about rice, medicine, roofs, travel, and offerings. One strip said only, "Ask Matsu about beans." Another said, "Return blue bowl." Another was blank except for a single ink dot. Wren almost smiled. "Why keep the dot?" The abbot held it up. "I thought it was the beginning of something. Then it was only a dot. Why not throw it away? It has done nothing wrong." They both sat quietly with this. The dot had no lesson to announce. It did not become a moon, an eye, a seed, or a sign. It remained a dot in a box of useful things. Useless, perhaps, but not offensive. Wren felt strangely comforted by it. Even what did not become meaningful did not need to be punished. So many thoughts are treated harshly because they do not become answers. A feeling appears, and we ask it to become wisdom. A memory appears, and we ask it to become closure. A worry appears, and we ask it to become a plan. A tiredness appears, and we ask it to become discipline. Even a moment of peace appears, and we ask it to become permanent peace. But some things are only dots. They arrive. They mark the page. They remain small. They do not have to grow into anything before the heart can rest. Tonight, if a small thought appears in your mind, you do not have to build a house around it. If a feeling touches you and does not explain itself, it may simply be a dot. If a memory comes with no clear instruction, it may simply be a dot. If the mind says, "This must mean something," you may answer softly, "Perhaps not now." Let what is small remain small. The body knows this kindness. A single breath does not ask to become a lifetime of breathing. It comes, it leaves, and the next one is allowed to be separate. One heartbeat does not demand the whole future. One blink does not carry the whole night. The hands do not need to close around every small mark and make it important. Ren placed his written sentence beside the blank strip and the dotted strip. The ink was nearly dry. "What should I do with it?" he asked. "Send it if sending is ready," the abbot said. "Keep it if keeping is ready. Burn it if burning is ready." The paper is less important than the tightness in the hand. Ren looked down and saw that his fingers were gripping the edge of his robe. He had not noticed. Slowly, he loosened them. The abbot watched the courtyard. A letter can be another way to hold on. Silence can be another way to hold on. Speaking can release. Waiting can release. There is no fixed shape. Ren breathed in. The words were not simple in the way rules are simple. They did not give him a place to hide from listening, but they opened a little more space around the decision. He did not have to send the letter to prove courage. He did not have to keep it to prove patience. He only had to notice the hand. Was it closing or opening? At noon, a messenger from the lower village came to the temple with a basket of turnips and news that a merchant would travel near Ren's home village within 3 days. If Ren wished to send a note, the messenger could carry it to the road station. The timing stirred him. 3 days. Not now, not forever. A small window, like a gate left open without calling his name. He thanked the messenger and returned to the veranda. The strip of paper lay where he had left it. Dry now. The words had not changed. They had not become more powerful. They had not become less true. They simply waited. Ren picked it up. For the first time, waiting did not feel like avoidance. It felt like letting the sentence breathe. That evening, he placed the strip in the wooden box beside the dot. Not hidden, not sent, not destroyed. Resting. The abbot closed the lid. "Tomorrow?" Ren asked. "Perhaps," said the abbot. Outside, the rainwater in the courtyard reflected one pale cloud moving across the late sky. The cloud did not hurry to leave its reflection. The water did not hurry to keep it. Both belonged to the moment, and neither asked for a promise. Wren stood with empty hands. The sentence could wait. The road station could wait. Even courage, he discovered, did not always arrive as a dramatic step. Sometimes courage was allowing one honest line to sleep in a wooden box until morning. Courage slept in the wooden box until morning. Wren slept too. The sleep was not deep at first. He turned once, hearing wind brush along the outer wall. He woke once when rainwater dropped from a roof tile into a basin below, one clear sound after another. But each time the thought of the letter came, it did not climb onto his chest. It rested somewhere outside him, in a box, beside a dot that had done nothing wrong. Before dawn, the bell sounded through a pale mist. Wren rose, folded his mat, and washed his face in cold water. The cold touched him fully, but briefly. He did not make a lesson from it. He only felt the water, the skin, the small shock of being alive. The temple moved slowly into the day. The scholar prepared to leave after breakfast. His papers were tied again, but not as tightly as before. The red cord around them had a loose knot, easy to open. He bowed to the cook, to the gatekeeper, to the abbot, and even to the cat, who accepted the bow with no visible gratitude. At the gate, the scholar paused beside Wren. "I came for the answer to one question," he said. "And are you leaving with it?" Wren asked. The scholar touched his sleeve, where the folded paper now traveled. "No, I am leaving with a better place to keep it." The gatekeeper gave him a packet of roasted barley for the road. The cook gave him 2 cracked chestnuts wrapped in cloth. Matsu appeared from the garden and handed him a cabbage leaf, saying only, "For looking at, not eating." The scholar bowed more deeply to that leaf than to anything else. Then he walked down the wet steps toward the village road. Wren watched until the scholar became small between the pines. The road did not look grand. It was muddy, uneven, and partly hidden by mist. Yet it was enough for departure. After breakfast, the messenger from the lower village returned. He was a young man with quick feet and a straw cape still wet from the road. He stood under the veranda, shaking water from his sleeves, while the abbot asked about the road station. The merchant would pass the next morning, not in 3 days after all. The rain had changed his route. If Wren wanted to send a note, it would need to be ready by evening. At once, the old tightening returned. Not violently, not like before, but clearly. A gate had become narrower. Tomorrow had moved closer. The wooden box no longer felt like an endless shelf. The sentence inside it had been given a weather report. Wren felt his hand close. The abbot noticed. He always seemed to notice the hand before the face. "Bring the box," he said. Wren went to the veranda room and opened the small wooden box. The strip of paper lay beside the dot, unchanged by sleep. He lifted it carefully. The sentence was still simple, still true, still unable to carry the whole journey. When he returned, the abbot had placed a larger sheet of paper on the floor. Wren sat with the brush in his hand. Many words came again. They stood at the edge of the mind like villagers at a gate on offering day. Some carried anger, some carried tenderness, some carried old evidence, some carried fear of being misunderstood. Some wanted to explain how long he had suffered. Some wanted to make his brother suffer too, just enough to balance the old pain. Wren did not invite them all inside. He read the first sentence again. "I have been carrying our last words too tightly." Then he added one more. I do not know yet how to repair them, but I wanted to stop pretending they are not with me. He stopped. The brush rested above the page. His mind said, more. His chest said, enough for now. He waited, not to avoid writing, but to listen. The rain had taught him this. The ash had taught him this. The rice grains, the chestnuts, the trapped branch, the empty lantern, the dot in the box. All of them stood quietly behind him, not as rules, but as friends. The abbot read the 2 lines. That can travel, he said. Wren looked at the page. Only 2 lines? The messenger has 2 feet, said the abbot. He reaches villages with them. Wren laughed softly, and the laughter loosened what the brush could not. Sometimes the heart believes a small message is not worthy of the road. It thinks only complete healing deserves to be sent, only perfect courage, only polished forgiveness, only a full explanation, strong enough to survive every possible reply. But life often travels by smaller means. A bowl of soup, a cabbage leaf for looking at, 1 line of truth, 2 feet on a muddy path, a breath that does not finish the pain, but stops adding to it for a moment. Tonight, you may not have the whole repair. You may not have the complete apology, the perfect decision, the clear future, the peaceful mind, or the final answer. But perhaps you have one small, honest thing. A sentence, a sigh, a softening in the hand, a willingness to stop pretending that you are not tired. Let that be enough to travel through this night. The back can rest against the bed as if against a quiet wall. The shoulders can let the road be walked by tomorrow's feet. The hands can open, no longer gripping the brush after the ink has been placed. The breath can come and go, carrying only its own small distance. Wren folded the letter when the ink dried. He did not seal it with force. He did not press the crease as if pressing the past into obedience. He folded it once, then again, and wrote his brother's name on the outside. The name looked strange after so many years of being only a thought. At sunset, he gave the letter to the messenger. The young man tucked it inside his dry pouch, bowed, and went down the steps. Wren watched him leave until the mist took him. Then there was nothing more to do with the letter that night. This was the strange mercy. Once released, it no longer belonged to his hand. The road would carry it. The messenger would carry it. Weather would carry it. Perhaps his brother would read it. Perhaps he would not. Perhaps an answer would come. Perhaps silence would return. None of this could be walked by Wren before its time. He stood at the gate with empty hands. Even hope, he discovered, could wait without being abandoned. Even hope, Wren discovered, could wait without being abandoned. That evening, after the messenger disappeared into the mist, Wren remained at the gate longer than the cold required. The stone steps below were empty. The pines held the last drops of rain. The road curved away toward the village, then vanished behind low clouds. Somewhere beyond that gray distance, the small folded letter was moving without him. This felt strange. For years, the words to his brother had lived inside his own body. They had risen in the night, walked with him on paths, sat beside him during meals, tightened his hand around broom handles and water buckets. Now, 2 lines of them had left. Not all, not enough to finish the past. Only 2 lines. Yet the place where they had been felt open, as if a drawer had been pulled out and not yet filled again. The mind, finding space, tried to make new work. Will he read it? Will he understand? Will he answer? Will he laugh? Will he be angry? Will silence come back heavier than before? Wren listened to these questions as they gathered at the gate. They were not enemies. They were simply the old habit of following what had already gone. The gatekeeper came to close the outer doors for the night. He carried the wooden bar across his shoulder and walked slowly, because wet stone can make a careful man wiser. "You sent it?" he asked. "Yes." The gatekeeper set the bar into place. "Then let the road have its turn." Wren looked at the closed gate. "My mind keeps walking after it. Then your mind will become tired and come home." The old man lifted the lantern and turned back toward the temple. Wren followed. "Let the road have its turn." The sentence stayed with him through the evening chores. While wiping bowls, he imagined the road carrying the letter step by step, not because it promised a good ending, but because roads know how to receive feet. While folding a cloth, he imagined the messenger stopping at a wayside shelter, the letter safe in his pouch. While closing the library shutters, he imagined his brother's name written on the outside, moving farther from Wren's hand. At last, the abbot called him to the main hall. The hall was dim. Only 3 lamps burned before the altar. Their light did not reach every corner, and no one tried to make it. Shadows rested where shadows belonged. The floor smelled of old wood and rain-damp robes. The monks sat quietly in 2 rows, not chanting, not speaking, simply present before the night deepened. Wren took his place near the back. At first, sitting was difficult. His body was still, but his mind continued down the road. It crossed bridges. It entered villages. It opened the letter. It answered itself in his brother's voice. It imagined forgiveness, anger, confusion. No reply. Then it imagined what Wren would say to each possible reply. Then it noticed it was imagining and became embarrassed. Then it tried to stop imagining, which was only another way of imagining. The abbot struck the small wooden block once. The sound was clear, dry, and brief. Wren's thoughts did not vanish, but the sound gave him one simple place to return. Wood meeting wood, hearing, fading, silence after fading. The abbot struck the block again. This time, Wren noticed the space after the sound more than the sound itself. The hall did not rush to fill it. The lamps did not lean forward. The monks did not improve the silence. Even the rain outside had stopped, leaving only the occasional drop from a roof edge. A third strike. Wren felt his hands resting on his knees. He had not noticed their weight before. The palms were turned down, the fingers slightly curved. No letter in them. No brush, no pebble, no branch, no bowl, no bucket. No tool for fixing, explaining, pulling, holding, carrying, mending, or proving. Only hands. Something in his chest loosened. Not because the future had become safe, but because his hands were finally doing nothing. There is a deep kindness in allowing the hands to be empty. So much of the restless mind begins with the feeling that something must be held. A plan, a worry, a person, a memory, a role, a possible outcome. The hands may be resting, but inside we are still gripping. We hold conversations that are not happening. We hold work that cannot be done tonight. We hold the road after the letter has already gone. But empty hands are not careless hands. They are hands between tasks. Hands trusting the road. Hands letting the bowl sit on the shelf. The question dry by the lantern. The ash feed the soil. The branch remain under ice. The letter travel beyond the gate. Tonight, your own hands may be empty, though your mind says they are not. Feel them as they are. Resting on the blanket. Resting beside you. Warm or cool. Heavy or light. Perhaps curled. Perhaps open. They do not need to prove that you care by tightening. They do not need to carry tomorrow into the bed. It can be ordinary hands again, belonging to a body that has done enough for one day. Let the arms soften from the shoulders down. Let the elbows become quiet. Let the wrists release their hidden effort. Let the fingers loosen by one small degree. Not forced open, not arranged, only allowed. The breath can move through the chest without asking the hands to help. The belly can rise and fall without being guarded. The back can rest against what holds it. In the hall, the abbot struck the block one final time. The sound entered, opened, and disappeared. Wren did not follow it. He heard the disappearance too. For a moment, he understood nothing, and that was peaceful. The letter was on the road. His brother was wherever his brother was. The past remained real. The future remained unopened. But Wren was sitting in the hall with empty hands, and the lamps were burning with just enough oil for the night. When the sitting ended, no one spoke for several breaths. Then the monks rose quietly. Robes shifted. Knees cracked softly. Lamps were checked. Doors were closed. Wren walked to his sleeping room with a slower step. Outside, clouds had parted. A few stars appeared above the black roof line. Not many, but enough to show that the sky had continued behind the rain. He stopped beneath the eaves and looked at them. The stars had not been waiting for him to calm down. They had simply been there, behind weather. Wren bowed to no one in particular. Then he went inside, lay down, and placed his hands where they wanted to rest. The road could walk through the night. The letter could travel through mist. His brother could receive tomorrow when tomorrow reached him. And Wren, who had carried so much for so long, could finally let the hands be empty until morning. Wren let his hands be empty until morning. When he woke, the world had become clear. Not clear in the way a question becomes an answer. Clear in the way air becomes after many days of rain. The sky above the temple was pale blue. The roofs shone where water still held the light. The pines stood dark and clean. Every stone in the courtyard looked as if it had been washed by a patient hand. No message had returned. No news had arrived. The letter was still somewhere on the road, or perhaps already at the road station, or perhaps still folded in the messenger's pouch while he drank tea beside a fire. Wren did not know. The not knowing was present, but it did not fill the whole morning. He swept the courtyard slowly. Not because the courtyard needed to be perfect, not because snow, rain, leaves, and footprints could be defeated. He swept because the broom was in his hands and the stones were before him. Pine needles gathered in small lines. A few wet leaves clung to the bristles. Sunlight touched the edge of the gate. The old gatekeeper watched from his stool, mending another strap. "You are sweeping differently," he said. Wren looked at the broom. "Am I?" "You are not arguing with the ground." Wren smiled. The courtyard was not finished. It never had been. Even as he swept, a bird landed on the wall and shook water from its wings. A drop fell onto a clean stone. A leaf loosened from a pine and drifted down. Far above, a small cloud moved toward the sun. Wren saw all of it, and for once, none of it insulted the work. The broom moved. The ground received. The morning changed. After breakfast, the abbot asked Wren to walk with him to the upper ridge. The path climbed behind the temple, past the garden, past the pine slope where the trapped branch had begun to thaw, past a spring that ran under stones and appeared again in a narrow silver thread. They walked without hurry. The abbot carried his staff. Wren carried nothing. Halfway up, they passed Matsu mealing by a patch of dark earth. A few green tips had appeared between the straw covers, almost too small to trust. Matsu did not look up. "Do not praise them loudly," he said. "They are shy." The abbot nodded gravely, as if this were important instruction. They continued. At the ridge, the world opened. Below them, the temple roofs lay among the pines. The village smoke rose in thin white lines. The road curved through fields still damp from rain. Farther away, mountains folded behind one another, blue and gray, their peaks holding the last snow. The sky was wide enough to make every human urgency seem both tender and small. Wren stood beside the abbot and looked down at the road. Somewhere along that road, his letter had gone. The abbot rested both hands on his staff. What is the mind doing? Wren listened inwardly. It was waiting. Yes, but not in the old way. Not like a fist, not like a guard at a door. More like a bowl set on a shelf, empty now, able to receive if something came, able to remain empty if nothing came. "It is waiting," Wren said. The abbot nodded. "And are you waiting with it or inside it?" Wren breathed. Below, the road turned behind a stand of trees and disappeared. "I think," Wren said slowly, "I am standing beside it." The abbot smiled. "That is a good place to stand." They remained on the ridge for a long time. No great insight struck Wren like lightning. No old sorrow vanished. No promise came from the sky. but the space around everything grew wider. The letter could be on the road, his brother could be silent, the temple could be unfinished, the future could remain folded, the mind could move, the breath could continue, the body could stand under the open sky without solving the whole horizon. This is the quiet the stories have been walking toward. Not a quiet that depends on everything being done. Not a quiet that waits for every apology, every answer, every plan, every wound, every hope, every task, and every fear to take its proper seat before you are allowed to rest. A quieter quiet than that. A kinder one. The quiet of setting down the broom when the bell sounds. The quiet of a water jar settling when no hand stirs it. The quiet of a leaf circling until the current changes. The quiet of beans tended before they burn, and roof cloth left until rain asks for it. The quiet of one pebble in the hand instead of a whole village in the mind. The quiet of one stitch, one grain, one ready branch, one honest line. The quiet of a folded question drying beside a lantern. The quiet of empty hands while the road has its turn. Tonight, let this quiet come not as a command, but as permission. Everything does not have to leave you before you sleep. Some things may still be on the road. Some may still be in the basket. Some may still be under ice, in the soil, in the shell, in the folded paper, in the unopened reply. They can remain there for now. Your body can rest before the world is complete. Your shoulders can soften before certainty arrives. Your jaw can unclench before every conversation is resolved. Your hands can open before every task is done. Your chest can breathe before every question becomes clear. Your eyes can grow heavy while life is still life, unfinished, tender, moving. Feel the bed beneath you like the earth beneath winter straw. Feel the blanket like a roof that does not need to hold the whole sky. Feel the breath enter and leave, asking only to be this breath, not tomorrow's breath, not the final breath of peace, only this one, arriving, staying briefly, and passing on. Wren and the abbot walked back down as afternoon light began to soften. At the temple gate, a child from the village had left a small offering: 3 chestnuts, a crooked twig, and a stone shaped almost like a sleeping bird. No note explained them. No one needed one. The gatekeeper placed the chestnuts in the kitchen basket, the twig by the kindling, and the stone on the veranda rail where anyone could see it, and no one had to understand. Evening came. The bell sounded across the courtyard. Wren stood with the broom in his hands and watched the last light touch the wet stones. He had not received an answer. He had not become a different person. But when the bell faded, he leaned the broom against the wall. The courtyard could wait. The road could wait. The letter could wait. His brother could wait. Even Wren could wait for Wren. Inside, the lamps were being lit. Soup steamed in the kitchen. The cat walked through the hall as if it owned every unfinished thing. The abbot's cup rested beside the veranda. In the garden, beneath straw and dark soil, small green tips kept their own silence. Wren entered the warm room and sat with the others. The night gathered gently around the temple, not as a problem to solve, but as a place to rest. One by one, sounds became softer. Bowls were set down. Robes settled. Breath slowed. The world remained unfinished, and still the world was held. So now, let your own night hold what remains. Let the unfinished stay outside the gate. Let the mind become a road no one has to walk to the end. Let the hands be empty. Let the breath continue. Everything can wait. And you may sleep